Did you guys notice that your family started to, the family environment started to change based on the fact that your children were getting older? Not maybe just Alicia, maybe some of the other children getting into the other activities now.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's growing up. And so the dynamics of just taking them to dance school, it's different now.
Right.
Like you said, she had to go away, and so things are changing now, and you guys have to adapt to that change and hope that the disciplines that you instilled in her and the rest of your children stuck with them since that they were away
Yeah.
from home. How did you feel about that?
Both were dance moms. We usually met once a month to have lunch. And she was a member of country club, and she invited me to go out to her country club. But at the country club, only people there were men, and then the two of us. It was her husband's country club, I guess. So anyway, we went to the country club. We ordered our salads. We gotten all dressed up. Her daughter had gotten a chance to go to dance theater dance too. The two of us over our salads just wept. We cried and cried and cried, and we looked good, but we
Yes.
were crying
Yes.
like crazy because we had protected our children.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, our children were in this big world of New York, and we couldn't do one thing to help. And when Alicia went, she went into the International House. After living with family for a while, she moved into the International House. And there were just lots of strangers going in and out of the International House. We called every day to call and make sure she was in her room at a certain time. That was every day that God sent. And finally she got moved in with an older lady and older people, over like 60. I said, you all please look at my, but it did make me feel better.
Yeah. Well,
It really
Mr.
did.
Mitchell, who's the head of dance theater, promised us that he would not only pay for her education to finish, but he'd look out, and he would assign someone to look out for her. So he asked Virginia Johnson, who now runs the dance theater of Harlem, was a phenomenal dancer, to keep an eye on her and all that. So they had some of the older dancers make sure that she, was okay.
So that made you feel a little better.
Yeah, and I went up to take her up there when he offered her, because she was ecstatic. I mean, she would have been. I was very uneasy about her not finishing high school. I thought, well, dancers get injured and all that. She won't even have a high school education. To me, that would be like going backwards.
Yeah.
But she was in a special class where humanities, I think it was, and she wrote her dissertation even in high school. It was an advanced class on famous black choreographers. So her dream was to dance for Miss Jameson, Mr. Mitchell, and I'm forgetting his name now, the fellow that runs, Alonzo King, Mr. King.
Okay.
And so she wrote this paper. And so when Mr. Mitchell called, she wasn't home. She called, and he called us. We were home. I had been sick, so I was home at the time. And when she came, and he said, no, I'll do all of that. I'll make sure. But, at 17, that's the year for a ballet. It seemed awfully young to me,
Yes.
I mean, for her to go away. We told her when she came in, she was just flying. I mean, Mr. Mitchell would, So I took her up there, and he made all these promises about school and looking out after her, and is what she loved to do. So it would have been, it would have been crime not to let her do what she wanted to do.
Just to ask more about, as far as her love and passion for it, Alicia mentioned to us that that you had some either newspaper clippings or posters of different individuals in her room when she was little, and she shared with us the impact that those images had on her when she was in her own quiet space. And so I want to ask you now, what were your thought processes when, sharing those types of images with Alicia?
I really wasn't the person responsible. The person responsible was her great aunt on his side,
Okay.
who had was a self-made reporter up in Woodstock. She was in her 90s then, maybe.
Oh, and first? No, she's probably in her 80s. She
Right,
was living in New York
80s,
City.
right. But over the years, when Virginia Johnson first became a dancer, she interviewed Virginia Johnson for Woodstock newspaper. And she would interview different people. They would give her their pictures. When we came here in 1980 to live, we went to visit her. And she gave Alicia a stack of pictures that had been given to her by dancers who were in the day of when Virginia Johnson was young, and even before that, because she had all kinds of dancers from ABT, from all the different dance companies, and she gave her maybe about 10 or 12 different pictures, and also gave her articles on Alvin Ailey when Alvin Ailey first got started. So she ended up with all this information, and I just framed them and put them in her room. I had Gregory Hines and Glover when Glover was a little boy, so they were on the walls. And when she looked up, she would see, those images. And I think her great aunt, whose name was Fam, was just a wonderful person in telling her stories about the Alvin Ailey Company when it was young, and also about dance theater when it was young, and how she interviewed the Virginia Johnson and Mr. Mitchell when they were young people. And that was really kind of fascinating. And I'd like to tell a story, though. When I was in high school, the Delta Sigma Thetas had a program. And I believe the man who was dancing was Mr. Mitchell. They had a program where this famous dancer came in to dance. And they opened up the gym at a black college, Winston-Salem Teachers College in Winston-Salem. And they put all of us in bleachers, young girls who would come into a program offered by the Deltas. And he, alone with music, was in the middle of the gym floor in a black leotard, and he danced.
Wow.
That was really kind of an amazing thing to see a man perform alone for a bunch of ladies and girls, and then to see this same man then invite my daughter to come to dance. And when she was a child, they invited her to come backstage and to dance with them. So she spent a day 2 or 3 times with dance theater when they would come to the Kennedy Center as a little girl. And she would go back, and I would sit there with her for the day, and she would dance with them in the back, exercise. And one person said to her, honey, that school is calling you, And she was saying, I bet you will never come here. But that was one of the older dancers in the elevator.
So Alicia, her temperament, her personality, she willingly wanted to participate in dance. This was not something that you guys had to coax her, because there's a lot of parents out here that are wondering, as far as soccer, do they have to drag their kids to soccer practice? Did you guys have to drag Alicia? Was it something that you fought, or she wanted to do it on her own?
No, she wanted to do it. No, Alicia, you'd have to stop Alicia. That was, you'd have to say, that's enough, honey. It's 10 hours now. You're 12. That's enough. That's just enough. There was only one time I can remember after some competition that she decided she didn't want to dance anymore.
Wasn't good enough.
That she felt she wasn't good enough or whatever. But a month later, that passed, and then there was never another time you couldn't stop her. I mean, she has a really, Alicia has a nice, calm, quiet demeanor about her, but she's got a very powerful will.
Yes.
And it doesn't come out in your face, but she's really, even when she had injuries and she went, she thought she couldn't dance when she went to Columbia. I mean, she drove herself. She graduated magna cum laude. I mean, she has a really powerful will, and so we never had she had to drag us to take her to another thing.
Wow.
More than us dragging
That's
her.
amazing.
Yeah, something she was born with. I don't know.
Do you remember, do you remember when she said, Mom, Dad, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be here. Do you remember that day when she said that? And when she said that, did you say, nah, come on, Alicia? Or did you say, well, yeah, you could be?
What I remember most was when she was 5 and 6 years old dancing, that adults would cry. Wow. That's what I remember. And I concluded that there was something different about this dancer, because when adults are looking at a dancer and they break down and cry, this person is bringing out an emotion in people that most people don't bring out in people. They are crying. Mm. We're having a performance and these people are crying. And then that group, her group were a group of hoofers. Yeah. They were little girls who came from the best schools around, and a lot of them ended up in this one school. They were winning every competition they entered. They were just killing everybody, and they were hoofers. All of them were like that, and all little girls were driven, and most of them did go into dance in some way. But what I remember most is the emotion of it all. And she didn't ever say, I'm going to be a dancer. It was just, I am a dancer. I don't think she ever remembers a time when she wasn't a dancer. And I think that's a very difficult thing for a dancer, because I remember my son saying, I'm more than a basketball player. He had to get that into his head. But if you have an injury, or you grow bigger, or something happens and you cannot dance, and you have no concept of yourself except as a dancer, that can be devastating. Yeah. Because you have nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that we always tried to focus on was make sure you do your homework, make sure you study. But even with that, when she entered a crisis of having injuries, she was devastated, because she had never thought of herself as anything other than a dancer. And you do need to think of yourself, what if? I mean, and maybe that will make a difference in the way people dance. Yes. But, what if I can't dance professionally? What if I become a teacher? Is not a teacher as good as becoming a dancer? Are there not other roles you can play in dance other than just being the performer in front of the stage? But a young person cannot see that performing is only a part of the picture, because the person who choreographed that is in control of the performer. And therefore, being able to see oneself not just as a dancer but as something else is very critical. And I think that there was a time when she couldn't get there. And then I think she went through internal conflict and then decided, yes, I can do other things. And that's when she was open to going on to school. And it was religious dancing that brought her back, because she wasn't dancing, and a young guy, Melvin, I don't remember his last name, Miller, I believe his last name, was at Columbia, and he was directing a religious dance group. And he asked her to come and dance with them, and she danced for them for about a year and a half while she was in school.
It didn't require your legs as much. Praise dancing doesn't,
right?
Because she was still recovering and hadn't really gotten the right diagnosis. She has, a certain condition, and they kept thinking it was all like torn meniscus or something. There was that, but there was something else, and it hadn't been diagnosed right. So it's a situation where her joints swell, so she couldn't dance.
So she has arthritis.
Which basically went back to what you guys were saying from the beginning, which is what you said, well, what if you can't dance?
Right.
And now you were saying the same thing, well, there's other things that individuals should know that they can do. Right. In addition, other than dancing, you can direct, you can teach, and you want young people to be aware that they should be open-minded to that reality from a young age, so that way they won't be so set back.
Absolutely. When you're raising I think for both of us have thought when you're raising a child, you're raising a person,
Yes.
not a dancer. Our oldest son played basketball, not a basketball player. You're not raising a basketball player. You're raising a person that you want to be rounded. Basketball is something that he did, and he loved it. He played in college, and that's wonderful. Alicia danced and made it really big. What was hard for her is by 19, she was on the subway, being advertised, and then this situation happened, and she couldn't, and it was devastating to her. And we wound up going to New York and spending a lot of time with her because she was, she was really thrown by it. All of a sudden, I can barely walk. So how did that happen?
Yes.
From this, I'm a star in the New York Times, I can't walk,
Yes.
and it's fast, and you're only 19. You don't have a set. You're not fully comprehending what's going on. But we were always trying to raise good people, not a good dancer. Dance is something that you do. Basketball is something that you do. Whatever our other son enjoyed doing, that's what you do. But that doesn't define you as a person. And I think going to college, having to go to university, and in her mind give up dance, which had been all she wanted to do from 2 to 19, and then she had skyrocketed. I think the New York Times had her as one of the 10 most exciting dancers in the United States or something like that. Their end of year review, whatever, and then you can't walk.
Right. But that kind of pressure puts you in a weird position. She knows she's injured. She knows she has a problem, but she doesn't tell anybody. So she's dancing on injuries that would not necessarily have gotten that bad had she stopped. But the dancer says, I can do it. I will play. I will keep dancing. And she wanted to dance this balancing piece where a person comes into the company and approves the dancer. And one of the original dancers comes in and works with the dancer to approve it. She knew she was injured. And she has to do all these turns. And she's pretending she's not injured. And she dances this piece and doesn't say anything. At the end of it, when she finishes dancing, do you know she's on the floor in the back crying like a baby? Wow. And from there, we find out that she has been injured and dancing on this injury and not telling anybody because she feels she has to keep going. If she had stopped, she may have been able to continue to be a ballet dancer on point, but she did not tell anybody. And I think that's one of the negatives of all this, of stardom, if you want to call it that, because she did not exercise logical thinking, but she did perform that piece before she had to stop. And there was a football player who was a professional football player, and whose name I don't remember, who recommended that she go down to the Houston clinic.
Called Lorraine Graves, her brother.
Right.
She was a famous dancer, Harlem dancer.
Right, and her brother was a football player. He recommended that we take her to the Houston clinic, and then Mr. Mitchell agreed, and so we took her down to the Houston clinic. And they operated on her knee and operated on her ankle because she was compensating. And then she had an operation on both of those, and the doctor there asked what was our goal, that she would be able to walk. Not dance, but just be able to walk down the street. And I would cry. I mean, we walk a half block. We got to let her sit on the ground because she can't walk. And then we would walk another half block. And to me, it was a roller coaster ride because here you got a 19-year-old who's like 100. And that was really very emotional for me. It is very difficult. It's just like being a football player. It's just like being a tennis player. It is very hard to make that dance look beautiful and flowing, and yet use the athleticism that's necessary to complete the moves. It is very, very hard on those dances. And as we looked at it, I said, oh my God, I never imagined, at 19 that my kid couldn't be able to walk. But she went, they operated, they rehabbed for a year, 2 years.
Still didn't do it then.
Right, but she couldn't go back on point. That's why she ended up
couldn't dance
in the other.
It wasn't until she was correctly diagnosed. Actually, one of those knee surgeries was an unnecessary one. It turns out there wasn't a torn meniscus. There was so much swelling they assumed it was. it was this condition that she has that was causing some of this. Because even Dr. Allen was saying, we did both surgeries, they were necessary, but there's swelling in here that doesn't look like it comes from a physical injury. I don't know why this isn't clearing up or why this is so swollen. It happened that my nephew, my brother's oldest son, is a rheumatologist, and he was here visiting, from California, where he was where he's a doctor, and he hadn't seen Alicia in a while because he's in California, but he knew of the situation. And he said, "Let me look at it." He put his hand on her knee, and he said, "Your knee is hot, and that shouldn't be from surgery. You have some kind of inflammatory problem going on, and it's a rheumatic arthritic problem you have." And from there, he sent her. Actually, he flew her out to San Francisco and diagnosed what the problem was.
Wow.
It's kind of like an autoimmune problem.
Yes.
And she, from there, she remains having to take medication.
So when we think about all of that, the best way that we can help not only dancers but just individuals is basically what you've said. If there is something wrong, we should not wait until it escalates, even though we have this inner strength and the inner Superman and the inner Superwoman inside of us that drives us for excellence, because that could work against us sometimes.
That's right.
Now, I was told about a dancer who danced on a broken toe. She didn't tell anybody. She knew her toe was broken, but she felt she had to dance. But those are the people who are those ones who make the dance companies. They are there and they work very hard at it, and that is a standard it has been established. But she took care of her needs, but she didn't tell another person, in a company, which I can't say which company it was in because I'm not supposed to do that. But you look at the dance and you say, wow. But I used to say, my child's a limping horse. We don't know how long she's going to limp. Yes. And then she may not limp anymore. And so I think that you look at things like that. I looked at Miss Jameson when she had her operation, her hip surgery, and she was walking around with a walker, and I said, oh my God. Mr. Mitchell, oh my God. You know that eventually you may end up in that situation because of the wear and tear of dance. So people who become dancers have to love it. Otherwise, you'd never put yourself in that kind of situation,
Yes.
You would say.
Plus, it's hard to make any money doing it. So
Yes.
it's something that either you love it or you don't do it.
And this is a good way to get the word out, because sometimes after the young generation don't see them anymore on the big screens or on the stages, they don't really know why they're not there.
That's right.
And so they're still dreaming about getting there, but they don't really know about the work that's involved and the injuries and the sacrifices.
Right.
And so you're basically saying that hard work is good, but we should always be sensible and always remember our health and our long-term well-being at the same time.
Absolutely.
But these are two old people talking.
Which means that
we have some wisdom.
But that's where the value is, because you're saying that if you listen, you could stay balanced and you can still strive and work hard, but just maybe avoid some injury so you can have longevity too.
Well, that's why most of the
oldness is
dancers are
wisdom.
young and not old. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But one of the things that I really both valued about Mr. Mitchell and about Ailey was that the dancers may push themselves, but they didn't. I mean, they've always been, at least with Alicia and what I've seen with other dancers, that we've gotten to know because they've become Alicia's friends. Both Miss Jameson, when she was director, and Mr. Mitchell were on their own, never pushed Alicia beyond what you should not be. He would sit her down, or I didn't see with other dancers too. It wasn't just special for Alicia, and always took care to make sure that if there was surgery needed, so while they're phenomenal companies, and they drive hard, I know, you know, Ailey dances hard. They're decent with the dancers. I mean, they're very decent. So even with Alicia, it was Mr. Mitchell would have sat her down. I know he was, but she, you know, she's long and lean, and this was so her parts are always these kind of flowing parts. This part that she was going to be in at the Kennedy Center was faster moving, and she wanted to prove to herself that she could do it. So she didn't say anything about her, you know, knee injury.
Okay. Welcome back. We are here with our special series, and we are live, and we're interviewing Mr. and Mrs. Graf. Can you tell me what basically got you interested in becoming a teacher?
I actually always saw myself as a helper.
Okay.
I always saw myself as getting married, living happily ever after, and following whoever I married around the world, whoever that was. And there was a lady in my college, Dr. Parker, down at North Carolina A&T. Her husband was a military colonel, a military major at that time, I believe. And I looked at her and I said, I can do that. It was as simple as that. She came in, looked beautiful, lecturing, young lady, and good afternoon. My name is Dr. Parker, and I'll be teaching this course, blah, blah, blah. I looked at her, I can do that. I can travel around the world, I can do what I'm doing, I can be this teacher. So I decided, after seeing her, that was what I would do. I would become a professor. And the teachers there started working with me. I finished school in 3 years, and from undergraduate school I went on to get a master's degree, and my advisor during the master's degree program worked with me knowing that I wanted to become a professor, and she then set up relationships with 2 colleges, University of Pittsburgh and the University of Wisconsin. And I ended up at the University of Wisconsin as a student working to become a professor. I wanted to be the best professor I could be, so I would go back and teach in a black school. And actually that was what I stated in my objectives, that I wanted to make sure I understood my materials very well so that I could go back and be an asset to my community. My statement wasn't very long, only 2 pages, but that was the gist of it. That was what I wanted to do. I then didn't know I would have money, but at the end of the year, just about time for school to begin, I was informed that they were giving me a grant and that I would be given a grant to go to the University of Wisconsin at Madison. So I went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison to become a professor.
Wow.
And that's how I actually got there.
That's great. How did you connect with the students as far as you had the education and the skill sets to be a professor, but it's one thing to have knowledge, and then it's another thing to be able to channel the information to an individual to where they can benefit. And when you were confronted with this new challenge of being able to teach, how did you help connect the information, your knowledge, to the student or to the classroom? Because you're confronted with so many different individuals from different backgrounds and cultures. How did you present it to make them being open to receive it?
My first experience as a teaching assistant was at North Carolina A&T. I was a teaching assistant for a man teaching Black history. And then when I went to West Virginia University, I became the regional president for the Student Association of Social Workers. And I traveled around lecturing for the 2 years I was there. I went from one end of the country to the other end of the country, and through that got a lot of exposure to the larger community, and had experience speaking in front of huge groups of people. And then after West Virginia, I went to Wisconsin, and I was required to be a teaching assistant. My teacher gave me the responsibility to be a teaching assistant, and something happened and she decided I would be the teacher. So instead of teaching, she allowed me, a 23-year-old kid, to teach the class, and she took a seat and sat there. So where we would have broken up the class and she would have taken part of it, I would have taken part of it, she sat there and allowed me to teach and to grow under her tutelage. And because of that, I became somewhat comfortable. And they kept me there forever. I wrote 2 dissertations before I could get out of the University of Wisconsin. But when I left and went for an interview for another job, I was so glad that they didn't let me go, because my interview was an hour and a half of questions from people who already knew the topic. And if I had not gone through what I had gone through, I would have had an extremely difficult time getting through that hour and a half. But because of the kinds of demands that were placed on me at Madison, when I went for that interview, even though I was tense, I was able to get through, and I was hired as a research associate, which meant that I was the school's representative in the larger community in terms of serving as a consultant in the areas of health and human services. I served as an operations researcher for the school there for 2 years, and then from there went down with him to Texas, and there taught at organizational theory and management, and created their first management program.
Oh, wow.
You know, so it was kind of exciting because each piece prepared me to move to the next step, and I was glad I didn't cheat.
Yes.
I read every book, I read every article, and each time I was able to make that next step without academically having difficulty. Now socially, it's hard for a young girl to be competing with 40 and 50 and 60-year-old people. That's very difficult. And to walk into a classroom where you are the youngest,
Yes.
and all of your students are older than you, that's very difficult. But because my advisors did prepare me, they were also compassionate. At one time, I needed to stop, and they said, go home and come back. And I did that, and I came back. I'm glad I had a chance to stop, to reevaluate myself, to see where I really wanted to be, because I felt I needed to be married, not more in the school. Everybody was having babies, and they had, you know, families, and I'm still out there. And I'm not decided to go that route. He's saying he would have, but I'm saying, oh. But anyway, I decided then I need a family. I need to have stability. I needed to have that part of me before I could go on. And once I had that together, I could go on and finish, you know.
Thank you for that. When you were getting the experience, doing your presentations, did it make you feel good to be able to connect with the audience? And then from that experience, when you found yourself in an environment where you were able to teach, even though you were young, was it fulfilling to you to do that? Or was it just a job?
No, it's never been just a job.
Okay.
It's always been giving back. I grew up in a society where people gave you a lot, and it was always expected you would give back proportionately to what you had been given. My parents and the other parents I knew gave you everything they had, and their whole thing was saying, my child needs this, my child needs that. And that was their life. Their lives were sitting around making the sacrifice so that you could get a good education and come back and give. I gave back to all the groups that gave to me. And I promised God, if you help me to get through this, you help me with my children, I'll help you with other people's children. And regardless of whether I get paid or not, I feel it's my responsibility to give back. That's just the way I am.
So with that mindset, you've seen the school systems and the school curriculums change over the years. They have taken gym, in some cases, out of the school, and in some schools they've even taken the arts out. How did you feel when you start to see where schools had to make choices financially about whether or not they should keep some of their arts programs, keep some of their the gym programs, because it was a big question at some point as far as budgeting and paying the gym teachers, so they started to pull different elements out of the school. How did that make you feel as an educator?
Well, That isn't an aspect that I focus on as much as he focuses on that. I think he would be better able to answer that question than I.
Okay, can you tell us some of the things that you have done over the years?
Yeah, well, up to a year ago, I worked for something called the Industrial Areas Foundation, which is the largest and oldest network of community organizations in the country. I guess even though we've done a lot of good things, our claim to fame is that President Obama came through our training as a young man when it was 1986 for 10 days, because he was training to be a community organizer at the time, and he heard of us. Our work is to build organizations in all kinds of communities, whether they're low income or middle income, so that people can come together from diverse backgrounds in a wider community in a city or wherever, and set their own agenda for what they think is needed and get enough capacity so they can negotiate with government or school systems or corporations or whatever. So some of we have 63 organizations around the country that are nonpartisan, just out of community. They're not part of a political party or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our work then takes us into schools. And what you were asking has always really disturbed me, because the arts provide, and physical education and all those things, provide a certain rounding for a human being that's going to help you in your life. And so when you take that out of a school and you don't expose young people to music, to dance, to art, to physical education, you are in a sense crippling that person. You're not giving them a full education and an experience where they can develop themselves fully. So, like our organization in Baltimore, which is called Build, is an organization of 40 churches and 10 schools. We came up with the idea of an authority for children, and got through the state legislature and city Baltimore to begin a program which is going 17 years now, called Child First Authority, because I always felt like you put the child first.
Yes.
And that's an after-school program that runs from 3 o'clock to 5:30, and the first hour of the 2.5 hours is for academics. It's helping the youngster with their homework or connecting up what they're having a hard time with, whether it's reading or maths or whatever. But the next hour and a half is trips to museums, is art classes, is chess clubs, is physical education, is a whole range. We've often been able to get people to donate instruments. So the youngsters we've organized their own orchestras, and then they perform. Like we have an annual day for them called Show What You Know, and we do it on the campus of Morgan State. And our parents come and the community comes and the kids perform, whether it's their art or a little play or whatever. And it's always a huge night. I mean, there's 2,000-3,000 people there, and it's great for the kids. If you take art away, if I didn't have recess as a youngster, and I couldn't have run around, there would have been. I was difficult enough, but if you didn't let me express it at all, if I had to just sit there and be drilled to a test, I don't know where I'd be. I mean, I'd probably be out of school at 16 or something. I mean, I wouldn't. My parents would never have allowed that, but I wasn't, a great student. I just had a lot of energy.
Yes.
Ditto. I loved being a majorette. I mean, I would have just died to do that every day. I would have done it every day if I could. I love being on the basketball team. I love being on anything that involved the performing arts. And I knew I was going to become an actress. I knew that. Nobody had to tell me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I didn't become an actress, but I've enjoyed the arts. And I think that if you can get a child to come to school because he or she thinks it's important And being important means if you want to be on this team, you must make a B. And that can motivate a child. Then those things are critical to programs, because not every child wants to be a rocket scientist. Some people just want to have fun. But I want to do well so that I can have fun. And I think young people are not that different today than they were then. I love basketball better than I like classes. But I knew I wanted good grades so I could play basketball. They went together.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of it is that we do a lot of work with young people in our organizations to get jobs and things like that. And oftentimes the employers will say, well, these young people, if they're coming from an economically, deprived community, well, they don't have soft skills. And what they're meaning about that is that, they don't interview well, or they're not, the breadth of their conversation isn't broad enough and all that. Well, if you don't provide the arts for young people, then where is that supposed to come from?
Exactly.
I mean, you're saying, we're going to have a 100-yard dash, but this child's going to start at a 40 yards ahead, and this child's going to start at the beginning, and all that child, has gotten all of the art and the music and exposed to things, and he can talk about art history and all that. The other child is just as bright, but because of budget, they claim, budget or whatever, they take it all out, or they drill them into these exams without, it's fine. I mean, they need to understand, they need to read and write, and all. I'm all for that. But when you take everything else out, the youngster that was deprived of, being exposed to gym and art and music and all these other things, well, that youngster, he or she doesn't have those soft skills because they weren't exposed to it, not because they couldn't. They just didn't get it. So the other kid comes and interviews, well, he can talk about this artist or that play or this. He's been in a play. They took all of that out of the schools where we were. So the thing we've tried to do is then provide it after school.
Oh, okay.
And quite honestly, pressure school systems to put it back in.
That's great.